Morgan Chen was once the most respected cybersecurity expert in government service until she uncovered corruption that threatened national security. When her former colleagues started disappearing one by one, she risked everything to protect the people who had abandoned her 3 years earlier, even though they were the same ones who destroyed her career. The small apartment smelled of instant coffee and electronic components. The walls were bare except for a single framed photo of 5 people in business attire standing in front of a government building. Their smiles looked genuine then, before the hearings changed everything. Morgan's laptop hummed quietly, running diagnostics on systems most people didn't know existed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years had passed since the Senate hearings where Morgan Chen had been branded a security risk. 3 years since she'd walked away from the cyber defense unit with nothing but the clothes on her back and the algorithms in her head. Now she worked from this tiny apartment in the forgotten corner of the city, running security audits for companies who never asked her real name. The rain tapped against her window like impatient fingers. Morgan pushed aside an empty ramen cup and focused on the code scrolling across her screen. She'd built a life from the ruins they'd left her with. Not the life she'd trained for, not the purpose she'd devoted herself to, but it was hers, and it was quiet. Until the alert came. Her secondary system, the one that monitored certain network patterns most people would never notice, began pulsing with a distinctive red glow. Morgan froze, cup halfway to her lips. This wasn't a standard breach. This was something she'd programmed to recognize 3 years ago, before everything fell apart. Someone was hunting her former team. Morgan set down her cup and pulled the keyboard closer. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, navigating layers of security she'd built to protect the very people who had testified against her. She hadn't spoken to any of them since the day Director Lawson had demanded her credentials and security badge, but she'd never stopped watching their digital footprints, because she knew someday someone would come looking. The code confirmed her fears. Michael Tran's secure server had been compromised 2 hours ago. Sarah Winter's communication channels had gone dark yesterday. And Daniel Garcia's location ping, which had been steady for the past 3 years, had suddenly jumped to an unauthorized address before disappearing completely. They were being systematically targeted, and nobody but Morgan knew it was happening. She leaned back in her chair, mind racing through possibilities. The team had been working on Project Sentinel when Morgan discovered the backdoor in the system, a backdoor that would give certain parties access to the most sensitive intelligence networks in the country. When she'd brought it to Director Lawson, she expected an investigation. Instead, she got a termination notice and a security escort from the building. The official story claimed Morgan had attempted to plant malicious code herself. Her security clearance was revoked, her reputation destroyed. Her former teammates, people she'd worked alongside for 5 years, people she'd considered family, had testified that her behavior had been erratic, her methods questionable. They claimed they'd noticed nothing wrong with the system, that Morgan's allegations were paranoid delusions from someone working too many hours with too little sleep. Only Morgan knew the truth. The backdoor existed. And now, 3 years later, someone was using it to eliminate everyone who had been close to the project, including the people who had betrayed her. Morgan pulled open her bottom drawer and removed a small black device the size of a credit card. It was her own creation, untraceable and more powerful than most government-issued computers. She'd built it during those first dark months after the hearing, when sleepless nights gave her nothing but time and bitter motivation. She never intended to use it, until now. Within minutes, she had accessed the secure channels she'd once helped build. The Cyber Defense Unit had upgraded their system since her departure, but Morgan had anticipated every change, every new protocol. She moved through their defenses like a ghost returning home, familiar with every corner. A message waited in Director Lawson's private folder, the one he thought was secured from all outside eyes. Morgan recognized the encryption. It was military grade, but with subtle modifications that matched the signature she'd found in the back door 3 years ago. The message was brief: cleaning operation in progress. 4 assets remaining. Timeline: 48 hours. 4, not 5. Someone was already gone. Morgan checked the personnel logs. James Wilson, the team's infrastructure specialist, had failed to report for duty 3 days ago. His status was listed as leave of absence personal, but his home security system had been disabled at 2:17 a.m. that same day, and his phone hadn't connected to any network since. This wasn't a coincidence. This was an elimination. Morgan worked through the night, tracking digital breadcrumbs through systems designed to leave no trace. By dawn, she had confirmed her worst fears. The back door she discovered 3 years ago hadn't been closed. It had been expanded. Whoever had planted it originally was now using it to systematically eliminate the entire Sentinel team. And they were doing it with access codes that only high-level officials could authorize. This was an inside job. And Morgan's former teammates were the next targets. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same people who had destroyed her career, who had called her paranoid, dangerous, were now in danger precisely because she had been right. She should let them face the consequences of their betrayal. She should walk away and let justice take its course. But that wasn't who Morgan Chen was. That wasn't who she had ever been. She reached for her go-bag, already packed and waiting in her closet. Old habits from her days in the unit. Always be prepared to move. Always have an exit strategy. She checked her watch, 6:17 a.m. Director Lawson would be arriving at the office in exactly 43 minutes. He was never late. Morgan secured her apartment with precision. Hard drives wiped. Backup systems engaged. She left nothing that could be traced back to her real activities. To anyone investigating, it would look like she'd simply gone to the corner store for groceries. She took one last look at the photograph on the wall. 5 smiling faces, 5 people who had once trusted each other with their lives. Her finger traced over each face. Michael, whose coding had always been elegant in its simplicity. Sarah, whose analytical mind could spot patterns no one else could see. Daniel, whose network architecture had revolutionized how they processed intelligence. James, whose infrastructure designs had made their systems nearly impenetrable. And Director Lawson, standing slightly apart, his hand resting on Morgan's shoulder with what she'd once believed was pride. The image blurred slightly as she stared at it. Not from tears. Morgan had cried those out years ago, but from resolve. She might have lost everything because of them, but she wouldn't let them lose their lives because of what she'd discovered. Time to return the favor, she whispered to the empty room. Outside, the city was just beginning to wake. Morgan blended into the early morning commuters, another face in the crowd. Her backpack contained everything she needed, her custom devices, 3 burner phones, enough cash to disappear if necessary, and the one thing she'd kept from her time at the unit, her personal notebook filled with codes and contingencies. That existed nowhere in digital form. The coffee shop across from the Cyber Defense Unit headquarters hadn't changed. Same faded awning, same overpriced pastries, same perfect view of the main entrance. Morgan settled at a corner table, her back to the wall, and opened her laptop. She wasn't here for Lawson, not yet. She needed to find the others first. Her custom program scanned the building's security protocols, identifying the active credentials for the day. Michael was already inside, his access card having been swiped at 5:46 a.m., much earlier than his usual arrival time. Sarah hadn't checked in yet. Daniel's credentials showed him accessing the building's side entrance 20 minutes ago. Morgan set up her surveillance algorithm and waited. At precisely 7 a.m., Director Lawson's town car pulled up to the curb. He stepped out, immaculate as always in his tailored suit, not a silver hair out of place. The security guards nodded respectfully as he passed. If he knew his team was being systematically eliminated, his face showed no sign of concern. Morgan's fingers moved rapidly across her keyboard, initiating the first phase of her plan. She wasn't going to confront Lawson directly. That would be suicide. Instead, she needed to get a message to her former teammates to warn them of the danger. Her program infiltrated the building's communication system through a backdoor she herself had created years ago. A backdoor she'd never reported, never documented, a failsafe she'd kept for herself. A precaution that had seemed paranoid. The time but now might save lives. She composed a message, simple and direct. Sentinel compromised. Wilson gone. You're next. Trust no one inside the building. She added a code phrase only the team would recognize, proof the message came from her. Then she sent it simultaneously to Michael, Sarah, and Daniel's secure devices. Now came the hard part. Waiting. To see if any of them would believe her. Sarah was the first to react. Her security badge activated the emergency exit on the east side of the building 7 minutes after Morgan's message went out. Morgan tracked her movement through the street. Cameras she'd hacked, watching as Sarah walked quickly but calmly toward the subway station. Morgan gathered her equipment and followed, keeping a careful distance. If Sarah was being tracked, Morgan needed to know by whom. She boarded the same subway car, positioning herself at the opposite end, her face hidden behind her screen. Sarah looked different. Her once long hair was cut in a practical bob, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She scanned the car constantly, her hand never far from her bag. She'd developed instincts in the past 3 years. Good, she would need them. When Sarah exited at Westlake Station, Morgan followed. The morning crowd provided perfect cover as she tracked her former colleague to a small park 3 blocks away. Sarah sat on a bench overlooking the water, her posture rigid, waiting. Morgan approached from behind, moving into Sarah's blind spot before speaking. Hello, Sarah. Sarah didn't jump, didn't startle. She simply turned, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized Morgan. I thought you might be dead, Sarah said quietly. Many people hoped I was, Morgan replied, sitting beside her. But I'm difficult to kill. Your message is accurate. James Wilson was taken 3 days ago. Michael and Daniel are still in the building, but they're being watched. And you would have been next. Sarah's knuckles whitened as she gripped her bag. How do you know this? Because I never stopped monitoring the back door I found 3 years ago. The one you all testified didn't exist. The accusation hung between them, heavy with history. Sarah looked away, her gaze fixed on the water. We had orders, she finally said. And I had evidence. Morgan's voice remained calm. This wasn't about reopening old wounds. This was about preventing new ones. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that someone is eliminating everyone connected to Project Sentinel. And they're using inside access to do it. Who? I don't know yet. But I know they have clearance levels that shouldn't exist. They have access codes that bypass every security measure in the building. And they've been planning this for at least 3 years. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Why are you helping us? After what we did. Because it was the right thing to do then, and it's the right thing to do now. Morgan pulled out her custom device and showed Sarah the intercepted message. They have a timeline. We have less than 48 hours to find out who's behind this and stop them. We? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Morgan, I'm not a field operative. I'm an analyst who spends most days staring at code. What exactly do you think we can do against people who can make James Wilson disappear without a trace? We can do what we always did best. We can find the patterns others miss. We can trace the digital footprints they think are hidden. And we can use the one advantage they don't know we have, which is me. Morgan allowed herself a small smile. They think I'm out of the game. They think I'm powerless. But I've spent 3 years building systems and contingencies they can't imagine. And now we're going to use them. Sarah studied Morgan's face, searching for something, trust perhaps or reassurance. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded slowly. "What about Michael and Daniel?" she asked. "We need to extract them before they're targeted. But we can't just walk into headquarters and take them out." "No," Sarah agreed, "but I know someone who can help with that. Someone who still believes." "Your original findings?" Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Who? Jamie Reeves. She took over your position after you left. She's been quietly investigating the anomalies in the system for months. She came to me last week with questions about your original report. Can we trust her?" "About as much as you can trust me," Sarah said honestly. Morgan nodded. "It would have to be enough. Contact her, quietly. Tell her to meet us at the backup location from the Meridian operation. That was 3 years ago. You think she'll remember? If she's been studying my work, she'll know where to go." Morgan stood, adjusting her backpack. "You have 2 hours. After that, I'll assume you've been compromised." Sarah caught Morgan's wrist as she turned to leave. "Morgan, I'm sorry. For what happened, for what we did." Morgan looked down at Sarah's hand, then back at her face. "Prove it by staying alive, and by helping me find who's hunting us." As she walked away, Morgan felt the weight of the past. 3 years pressing against her shoulders, the betrayal, the isolation, the knowledge that she had been right all along, but too late to prevent the damage. Now she was racing against a clock she couldn't see, trying to save people who had destroyed her career and her reputation. But in her core, where it mattered most, Morgan knew this was always who she was, a protector, even when those she protected didn't deserve it. She made her way to an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, a location that had been used for emergency protocols during her time with the unit. If Jamie Reeves had indeed been studying Morgan's methods, she would know this place held significance. The warehouse appeared empty, its windows boarded up, its exterior weathered by years of neglect. But appearances were deceiving. Inside, behind false walls and hidden panels, lay emergency equipment Morgan had stashed years ago. Communications gear, weapons, everything a team might need if traditional channels were compromised. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Morgan bypassed the rusted main entrance and used a service door hidden behind overgrown bushes. The security pad looked defunct, covered in grime, but she knew better. She entered a 12-digit code and the lock disengaged. With a soft click, inside, dust covered everything. Morgan moved through the space methodically, activating systems that had lain dormant for years. Backup generators hummed to life. Screens flickered on, bathing the room in blue light. She began running diagnostics, checking what equipment was still functional and what had degraded beyond use. As she worked, her mind processed the larger puzzle. Who would want to eliminate the Sentinel team after all this time? The back door, she discovered, had allowed access to classified intelligence. Yes, but the real value would have been in using that access, not in exposing it. Unless exposure was now imminent. Unless something had changed in the past 3 years that made the original conspirators nervous. Morgan pulled up news archives, scanning for anything related to cybersecurity legislation, intelligence oversight, or changes in agency leadership. One headline caught her attention: Senate Committee to Review Intelligence Gathering Protocols. The article was dated 3 weeks ago. The committee, led by Senator Eleanor Martinez, was conducting a comprehensive audit of all intelligence systems, with particular focus on backdoor vulnerabilities and unauthorized access. Morgan's pulse quickened. This could be the trigger. If Senator Martinez's committee discovered the backdoor, they would inevitably trace it back to Project Sentinel. And whoever had planted it originally would be exposed. Unless they eliminated everyone who might make the connection. The door behind her opened quietly. Morgan spun, her hand reaching for the weapon she'd retrieved from a hidden compartment. "Easy," Sarah said, stepping into the light. Behind her stood a younger woman with sharp eyes and a guarded expression. "This is Jamie Reeves." Morgan lowered her weapon but didn't holster it. "Did anyone follow you?" "No," Jamie answered before Sarah could. "I made sure of it." 3 switchbacks, 2 public transportation changes, and a 15-minute walk through service corridors. Morgan nodded, appraising the newcomer. Jamie Reeves looked younger than Morgan had expected, probably in her early 30s. Her movements were precise, her gaze analytical. She had the look of someone who'd seen enough to be cautious, but not enough to be cynical. "You've been investigating the anomalies in the Sentinel system," Morgan said. "Not a question." Jamie nodded. "For 7 months. Ever since I found discrepancies in the access logs that couldn't be explained by standard protocols. And you connected those discrepancies to my original findings. Yes, your documentation was thorough, even though most of it was redacted from official records." Morgan allowed herself a small smile. "I always kept backups." "Clearly." Jamie set her bag on a dusty table and pulled out a tablet. 2 days ago, I found something that confirmed your original theory. The backdoor isn't just passive surveillance. It's an active intrusion system with capabilities beyond anything we've documented before." "Show me," Morgan said, moving closer. Jamie pulled up a series of code sequences, highlighting patterns that pulsed with alarming regularity. "It's designed to mimic normal system functions, but it's actually harvesting authentication protocols. Every time someone with high-level clearance accesses the system, it captures their credentials and stores them for later use." "A credential farm," Morgan murmured, studying the screen. "Elegant and nearly impossible to detect, unless you know exactly what to look for. And now those harvested credentials are being used to target the original Sentinel team," Sarah added, her voice tight with tension. Jamie nodded. "The system logged unusual access patterns 3 days ago, exactly when James Wilson disappeared. The same credentials were used to access personnel files for the entire Sentinel team yesterday morning." "What about Michael and Daniel?" Morgan asked. "Were you able to warn them?" Sarah and Jamie exchanged a glance. "Michael responded to my message," Sarah said slowly. "He's going to meet us here." "But Daniel," she hesitated. "Daniel's workstation was empty when I checked," Jamie finished. "His security badge was used to exit the building at 9:17 this morning. But the surveillance footage shows someone else using his credentials. Someone wearing a maintenance uniform with their face obscured." Morgan felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "So we may already be too late for Daniel." "Maybe not," Jamie said. "Daniel was smarter than most people gave him credit for. If he suspected something was wrong, he might have left evidence or a trail we can follow." Morgan turned back to her systems, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I need access to the building's full security logs from the past 72 hours. Can you get that without triggering alerts?" Jamie smiled for the first time. "Already done." She handed Morgan a drive. Everything from main security, plus the auxiliary systems most people forget about. Elevator cameras, maintenance tunnels, even the VUCI monitoring system that tracks heat signatures throughout the building. Morgan took the drive, reassessing Jamie Reeves. The younger woman was more resourceful than she'd initially given her credit for. "Good work." As the data transferred to her system, Morgan outlined what they knew. "Someone is using the back door I discovered 3 years ago to eliminate everyone connected to Project Sentinel." James Wilson is already gone. Daniel Garcia may be compromised. Michael Tran is supposedly on his way here. And Director Lawson is scheduled to testify before Senator Martinez's committee next week, Jamie interrupted. It was just added to his calendar yesterday. The pieces clicked into place. That's the trigger, Morgan said. If Lawson testifies, he might reveal information that could expose the back door. Whoever planted it can't risk that. But why target the whole team? Sarah asked. Why not just Lawson? Because we all had pieces of the puzzle, Morgan replied. Wilson designed the infrastructure. Daniel built the network architecture. You analyzed the data flows. I found the anomalies. Together, we could reconstruct exactly how the back door functions and who might have installed it. And separately? Jamie asked. Separately, we're just people with fragments of classified information that no one would believe without corroboration. Morgan's voice was bitter with experience. As I learned 3 years ago, the door opened again and everyone tensed. Michael Tran stepped inside, looking older than Morgan remembered. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Morgan, he said, his voice a mixture of surprise and something else. Shame, perhaps. You're really alive. Disappointed? She asked coolly. He flinched. I deserve that. Yes, you do. But right now, we have bigger problems. Morgan turned back to her screens. Someone is hunting the Sentinel team. James is gone. Daniel is missing. And you and Sarah would have been next. Michael set down his bag, his movements careful, measured. I know. I've been tracking unusual access patterns in our systems for weeks. Someone's been using high-level credentials to move through restricted areas without triggering alerts. And you didn't report it? Sarah asked incredulously. To whom? Michael countered. The same people who buried Morgan's findings, who told us to forget what we saw. He shook his head. I've been gathering evidence, building a case that couldn't be dismissed. But they moved faster than I anticipated. Morgan studied her former colleague. Michael had been the first to testify against her at the hearing, his technical expertise lending weight to the claim that she had misinterpreted the data. Looking at him now, she saw the toll the past 3 years had taken, the constant vigilance, the isolation of keeping secrets. She recognized it because she saw the same marks when she looked in the mirror. We need to find Daniel, she said, redirecting focus to the immediate threat. And we need to warn Lawson that he's being targeted. Lawson? Michael's laugh was harsh. Lawson is the one who ordered us to disavow your findings. He's the one who led the charge to destroy your credibility. And he might be the next target, Morgan replied evenly. Whatever your feelings about him, we can't let him be eliminated before we understand who's behind this and why. The atmosphere in the warehouse was tense, charged with unspoken history and fresh fear. These people had betrayed Morgan in the most fundamental way possible. They had taken her reputation, her career, her purpose. And now she was risking everything to save them. Because some principles ran deeper than personal grievances. Because some truths were worth protecting, even when the cost was devastating. Morgan turned back to her systems, where Jamie's data was now fully uploaded. Let's start with Daniel's last known movements. If we can track his real exit from the building, we might be able to determine where he went or where he was taken. As they worked, Morgan allowed herself a moment of bitter reflection. 3 years in exile, building systems and contingencies for a day she'd hoped would never come. 3 years watching from the shadows as her former teammates continued their lives protected by the very safeguards she'd put in place without their knowledge. They had destroyed her career, but she had never stopped protecting them. The warehouse security screens cast an eerie blue glow across the faces of Morgan's makeshift team. 3 years of separation melted away as they fell into familiar patterns. Each person tackling the elements they knew best. Jamie worked alongside them with the focused intensity of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. Morgan isolated the footage from Daniel's last confirmed location, enhancing the grainy images until they could make out the small details that others might miss. His movements through the hallway were fluid but cautious, his gaze constantly scanning doorways and intersections. He knew he was being watched, Michael observed, leaning closer to the screen. Look at how he's checking reflective surfaces, creating opportunities to look behind him without being obvious about it. Morgan nodded. Daniel had always been the most security conscious of their team, bordering on paranoid even before the events that had torn them apart. Track his path through the building. Note any deviations from his normal routine. Sarah was already pulling up Daniel's schedule, cross-referencing it with his actual movements. He was supposed to be in a briefing on the 4th floor at 8:30 a.m. Instead, he went to the server room on level 2. The original Sentinel servers, Morgan murmured. He was looking for something. Jamie highlighted a section of footage showing Daniel entering the server room, then exiting 7 minutes later. His posture had changed, more tense, more urgent. He moved directly to the emergency stairwell rather than the main corridor. He found something, Morgan said with certainty. Something that confirmed he was in danger. Michael enlarged the image, focusing on Daniel's hand. He's carrying something. See that bulge in his jacket pocket? That wasn't there when he entered. Morgan studied the footage, then nodded. A storage device, most likely. He went to retrieve evidence before they could get to him. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard. His badge was used to exit through the loading dock at 8:47 a.m., but when I pull up that footage, the screen showed a maintenance worker in a standard uniform, cap pulled low, moving with confidence through the checkpoint. The guard barely glanced up as he scanned the badge. That's not Daniel, Michael confirmed. No, Morgan agreed. But someone wanted us to think it was. She turned to another screen, pulling up traffic camera footage from around the building. Daniel wouldn't use his primary exit if he suspected he was being tracked. He'd use one of our emergency protocols. Jamie looked up from her own screen. What about Protocol Whistler? The maintenance tunnel that connects to the subway system? Morgan felt a flicker of approval. Jamie had indeed studied their methods thoroughly. Check the eastern exit. Timestamp between 8:40 and 8:55 a.m. The footage showed several maintenance workers emerging from a service entrance, most in groups of 2 or 3. But one figure walked alone, head down, moving with purpose toward the subway station. That's him, Michael said with certainty. The way he walks, that slight hitch in his step from the knee injury in Belgrade. Morgan nodded. Track him through the subway cameras. Where did he go? As Jamie worked, Morgan turned to Sarah. We need to know what Daniel found in that server room. Whatever it was, it spooked him enough to initiate emergency protocols. Sarah hesitated. I can't access the server room logs remotely without triggering security alerts. We'd need to be inside the building. Or, Michael interjected, we'd need someone who's already inside and has the necessary clearance. He looked pointedly at Jamie. The younger woman nodded without hesitation. I can go back in. My absence hasn't been long enough to trigger suspicion, especially if I log in remotely first to establish presence. It's too dangerous, Morgan objected. If they're already targeting team members, you could be walking into a trap. They don't know I'm connected to you, Jamie countered. As far as anyone knows, I'm just doing my job, the job that used to be yours. Morgan studied Jamie's determined expression. Why are you willing to risk this? You barely know us. Jamie's gaze was unwavering. Because 3 years ago, they destroyed the career of someone who was trying to protect our country. Because they buried the truth about a vulnerability that could compromise our entire intelligence network. And because I believe in doing what's right, even when it's not safe. The word struck Morgan with unexpected force. They were her own beliefs, reflected back at her through someone who had never experienced the consequences of holding them. If you go back, Morgan said carefully, you need a cover story. A reason to access those server logs that won't raise flags. I'm already running a system-wide diagnostic as part of the preparation for Director Lawson's testimony next week. Jamie replied. Accessing the server logs would be a natural part of that process. Morgan nodded slowly. You go in, retrieve the logs, and get out. No heroics. No investigation beyond what we've discussed. If anything feels wrong, you abort immediately. Understood. While Jamie prepared to return to headquarters, Morgan turned her attention back to tracking Daniel. The subway cameras had followed him to Westridge Station, where he'd switched to the blue line heading west. He's going to the safe house, Michael said suddenly. The one we established after the Jakarta operation. Morgan raised an eyebrow. That was 4 years ago. You think he'd remember it? Daniel never forgot a safe location, Sarah affirmed. He used to quiz us on exit routes and rally points from operations years in the past. Morgan considered this. The Jakarta safe house had been a small apartment above a convenience store in the Western District, an unremarkable location with multiple escape routes and line of sight to 3 different transportation options. If Daniel was trying to go to ground, it was a logical choice. We need to check it, Morgan decided. Michael, you and Sarah go. Your faces won't trigger any recognition systems. You're still active agents with clean records. The unspoken implication hung in the air, unlike Morgan, whose face would trigger every security alert in the system. Michael nodded. What's our cover if we're spotted? You're not in the field anymore, Morgan pointed out. You don't need a cover. You're just 2 colleagues grabbing lunch in a part of town you don't usually visit. Sarah gathered her things, hesitating before she reached the door. What if Daniel won't come with us? After everything that happened. Tell him his survival depends on working with me one last time, Morgan replied. And tell him I know what he found in the server room. Do you? Michael asked. Morgan's smile was grim. I will by the time you bring him back. After they left, Morgan returned to her systems, diving deeper into the web of connections she'd been tracking for 3 years. The backdoor she'd discovered wasn't just a security breach. It was a masterpiece of malicious engineering, designed to harvest intelligence at a level that suggested state-sponsored resources. But the question remained, which state? And who inside their own government had facilitated it? She was so absorbed in her analysis that she almost missed the alert from one of her perimeter sensors. Someone was approaching the warehouse, moving with deliberate stealth through the overgrown exterior. Morgan quickly killed the main lights, leaving only the dim glow of emergency backup systems. Her hand moved to her weapon as she positioned herself with clear sight lines to both entrances. The figure paused at the main door, testing it before moving to the service entrance Morgan had used earlier. The security pad beeped softly as the correct code was entered. Morgan raised her weapon, steadying her aim as the door swung open. Don't shoot, Director Lawson said calmly, stepping into the dim light with his hands visible. I'm alone. Morgan didn't lower her weapon. How did you find this location? The same way I've known where you've been for the past 3 years. Lawson replied, I never lost track of you, Morgan. This was unexpected. Morgan had been meticulous about covering her digital footprint, changing locations regularly, using only secure channels for her operations. That's not possible, she said flatly. Lawson's smile was tired. You were the best analyst I ever had, but even you have patterns. Even you have habits that can be tracked if someone knows exactly what to look for. Morgan didn't respond, her weapon still trained on her former director. You're wondering why I'm here, Lawson continued, moving slowly into the room. Why, after 3 years of silence, I would suddenly seek you out. The thought had crossed my mind. I'm here because James Wilson is dead. Lawson's voice was flat, emotionless. His body was found in the Potomac this morning. Made to look like suicide. Morgan absorbed this information without visible reaction, though internally a cold knot of dread tightened. And Daniel? Missing. His apartment was ransacked last night. Professional job, no fingerprints, no evidence beyond the damage itself. Why come to me? Morgan demanded. You destroyed my career. You buried my findings. You let them. Call me unstable and paranoid when you knew I was right. Lawson met her gaze without flinching. Yes, I did all of those things. And now you expect my help? I expect you to do what you've always done, Morgan. The right thing, regardless of personal cost. Lawson moved further into the room, his gaze taking in the setup with professional assessment. You've been monitoring us all this time, haven't you? Watching for exactly this scenario to unfold. Morgan didn't confirm or deny it, but Lawson nodded as if she had. That's why I'm here, he continued. Because I knew that if anyone was still tracking the Sentinel project, it would be you. And because I need your help to stop what's happening. Before we lose everyone connected to the project. Including yourself, Morgan added coldly. Including myself, Lawson agreed. But more importantly, including the integrity of our entire intelligence infrastructure. The backdoor you discovered 3 years ago wasn't just a surveillance tool. It was the first phase of something much larger. Morgan finally lowered her weapon, though she kept it ready. Explain. The backdoor was designed to gather authentication credentials and operational patterns. To learn how our systems work from the inside. That information has been used to create a more sophisticated intrusion method. One that can mimic legitimate operations so perfectly that it's virtually undetectable. And now whoever created it is eliminating everyone who might be able to identify it, Morgan concluded. Exactly. Why should I believe you? 3 years ago, you stood in front of that tribunal and called me a security risk. You said my findings were the product of algorithmic errors and paranoid interpretation. Lawson's expression didn't change. I said what I had to say to protect the operation. What operation? Morgan demanded, her patience wearing thin. The one you've been part of for the past 3 years without knowing it. Before Morgan could respond, the door opened again. Jamie stepped inside, her face pale with tension. We have a problem, she said, looking between Morgan and Lawson with momentary confusion before continuing. The server logs show that Daniel accessed classified files from Project Mongoose before he disappeared. Morgan froze. Project Mongoose had been their code name for a theoretical vulnerability assessment they'd conducted years ago, a scenario testing how foreign intelligence might compromise their entire system. What files specifically? She asked. The simulation protocols. The ones that outlined how a hostile actor might insert themselves into our authentication systems and establish persistent access without detection. Lawson's expression darkened. They're not just eliminating witnesses. They're tying up loose ends before implementing the final phase. Morgan turned to him. What final phase? Complete system takeover, Lawson said grimly. The ability to control what intelligence is collected, how it's analyzed, and what findings are reported up the chain. Imagine foreign adversaries being able to blind us to their operations while simultaneously feeding us false intelligence that shapes our policy decisions. The implications were staggering. If what Lawson was saying was true, the backdoor Morgan had discovered 3 years ago was just the beginning of a much more sophisticated attack on their entire intelligence infrastructure. Why wait 3 years? Morgan challenged. If they had this capability, why not use it immediately? Because it wasn't ready, Jamie answered before Lawson could. They needed time to harvest enough credential patterns to understand the human elements of the system. Technology is only part of intelligence work. They needed to learn how analysts think, how decisions are made, what triggers suspicion and what doesn't. Morgan processed this, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. Senator Martinez's committee review. That's what forced their timeline. Lawson nodded. Her review would have eventually uncovered anomalies in the system, maybe not the backdoor itself, but enough discrepancies to warrant a deeper investigation. And you were scheduled to testify, Morgan added. Were you planning to reveal what you knew? I was planning to point her team in the right direction without exposing our counter-operation, Lawson replied. Morgan's eyes narrowed. What counter-operation? Before Lawson could answer, Morgan's security system chimed with an incoming alert. Sarah and Michael had returned, and they weren't alone. Daniel Garcia stepped into the warehouse behind them. His normally composed demeanor replaced by barely contained panic. They're inside everything, he said without preamble. Every system, every database, every communication channel. We built our own destruction and didn't even know it. Morgan noted the dark circles under his eyes, the nervous energy in his movements. Daniel had always been the steady one, the team member who remained calm even in the most chaotic situations. Seeing him like this was more alarming than anything he might say. What did you find in the server room? She asked. Daniel pulled a small device from his pocket, a specialized storage drive designed for maximum data compression. The original Sentinel code, the version before the modifications were implemented. He looked directly at Morgan. The version that would prove you were right all along. Morgan took the drive, turning it over in her hands. 3 years ago, this small piece of technology would have saved her career, her reputation, everything she'd built. Now it might save lives. Show me, she said simply. As Daniel connected the drive to their system, the warehouse door opened once more. Jamie stepped inside, her expression grim. They know, she said without preamble. Someone flagged my access to the server. Logs. My credentials have been suspended, and security teams are sweeping the building. Lawson cursed under his breath. How long do we have? I don't know this location yet, Jamie replied. But they will. It's only a matter of time before they track my movements or access traffic camera footage. Morgan made a quick decision. We need to move, now. Pack only the essential equipment. Anything we can't carry, we destroy. As the team scrambled to comply, Morgan pulled up the data from Daniel's drive. The code scrolled across her screen, a complex tapestry of commands and protocols that had once been her daily language. She scanned it quickly, looking for the discrepancies she'd identified 3 years ago. There, she murmured, highlighting a section. The original backdoor. Just as I documented it. Daniel looked over her shoulder, nodding. But that's just the beginning. Look at the evolutionary pathway it created. He navigated to another section of code, where the backdoor had been expanded and refined over time, growing more sophisticated. With each iteration, the latest version was nearly invisible, mimicking normal system functions so perfectly that even Morgan might have missed it if she hadn't known exactly what to look for. This is beyond anything we anticipated, she admitted. The complexity, the adaptability. This isn't just good programming. This is something else entirely. Artificial intelligence, Daniel confirmed. They created an AI specifically designed to infiltrate and mimic our systems. It learns, adapts, and evolves based on how we respond to its incursions. Morgan looked up sharply. That's not possible. The computational resources required would be massive, Daniel finished. Far beyond what any individual actor could access without detection. Which means we're dealing with a state-sponsored attack, Lawson interjected. One with resources comparable to our own. The implications hung heavy in the air. If a foreign government had successfully infiltrated their intelligence systems. At this level, the damage could be catastrophic, altering intelligence assessments, manipulating policy decisions, compromising field operations. We need to get this information to people who can act on it, Morgan said. People outside the potentially compromised chain of command. Senator Martinez, Jamie suggested. Her committee has the authority to order a system-wide shutdown. An investigation. Lawson shook his head. Martinez is being carefully managed. Any approach through official channels will be detected and neutralized before it reaches her. Then we go directly to her, Morgan decided, off the grid. No digital communications, no official protocols. She's under constant protection. Michael pointed out. Approaching her without clearance would trigger an immediate security response. Morgan turned to Lawson. You have access. You're scheduled to meet with her next week for preparation before your testimony. That meeting will be heavily monitored, Lawson cautioned. There's no way to speak freely without raising alerts. We don't need to speak freely, Morgan replied. We just need to get this drive into her hands with enough context that she understands its importance. Before anyone could respond, the security system blared with multiple alerts. Morgan moved quickly to the surveillance feed, cursing under her breath at what she saw. 3 vehicles approaching from the east. Standard tactical formation. They found us. The team moved with practiced efficiency, gathering essential equipment and destroying anything that couldn't be transported. Morgan initiated the emergency purge protocol for her systems, watching as years of accumulated data and analysis began systematically erasing itself. Exit plan? Sarah asked, her voice remarkably steady given the circumstances. Tunnel system, Morgan replied. The old maintenance corridors lead to the subway access point half a mile south. We split up 2 teams. Rendezvous at the secondary location in 3 hours. If we're compromised? Michael asked. Protocol Blackbird. Morgan's tone left no room for discussion. Everyone nodded, understanding the implications. If captured, they would reveal nothing, not locations, not plans, not the existence of other team members. Jamie, you're with me, Morgan continued. Daniel and Sarah, second team. Michael and Director Lawson, third. Why that configuration? Lawson questioned. Because each team needs someone with current credentials and someone who knows the old protocols, Morgan explained. And because if any team is captured, the others need to be able to continue the mission. The approaching vehicles were close now, their headlights visible through the warehouse's broken windows. Morgan led the team to a hidden access panel. In the floor, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Move now, she ordered. No lights until you're past the first junction. Radio silence unless absolutely necessary. As the others descended, Morgan took one last look at her systems, at the evidence she'd spent 3 years compiling, evidence that was now being systematically erased to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. The irony wasn't lost on her. Once again, she was watching the truth disappear, this time by her own command. Jamie touched her arm gently. We need to go. Morgan nodded, following her down into the darkness as the first sounds of the tactical team breaching the warehouse echoed above them. The tunnels were exactly as Morgan remembered, narrow, damp, and filled with shadows that seemed to move. In the dim emergency lighting, she navigated from memory, leading Jamie through a labyrinth of passages that had once been part of the city's original infrastructure. How did you know about these tunnels? Jamie asked, her voice barely above. A whisper. We mapped the entire underground network during an operation 5 years ago, Morgan replied. Most of it was removed from official records for security purposes, but I never forgot the layout. They moved quickly but cautiously, pausing at each intersection to listen for sounds of pursuit. So far, there was only silence, which concerned Morgan more than noise would have. Professional trackers didn't announce their presence. After 20 minutes of careful progress, they reached a maintenance shaft that would take them up to street level near the subway station. Morgan paused, listening intently before signaling Jamie to ascend. When we reach the surface, we blend in immediately, she instructed. No eye contact with cameras, no direct routes, no predictable patterns. We're just two office workers heading home after a long day. Jamie nodded, her expression betraying none of the tension Morgan knew she must be feeling. For someone relatively new to field operations, she was handling the pressure remarkably well. They emerged onto a busy street corner, joining the flow of evening commuters with practiced ease. Morgan kept her face angled away from traffic cameras, her posture deliberately different from her normal gait. Beside her, Jamie mirrored these precautions without needing to be told. As they walked, Morgan processed what she'd learned in the past few hours. The backdoor she'd discovered 3 years ago was part of a sophisticated long-term intelligence operation. Her career hadn't been destroyed because she was wrong. It had been destroyed because she was right, and that truth was too dangerous to acknowledge. But why had Lawson appeared now? What had changed in the equation that made her worth approaching? After 3 years of exile? You're wondering if you can trust him, Jamie said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Morgan glanced at her. Would you? I'm not sure, Jamie admitted. But I know we can't handle this alone. And if what Daniel found is accurate, we're facing something bigger than personal grudges. Morgan couldn't argue with that assessment. The AI-enhanced backdoor represented a threat level beyond anything they'd previously encountered. If it achieved full implementation, it could compromise every aspect of their national security infrastructure. They reached the subway station, descending onto the crowded platform with the anonymous efficiency of experienced operators. Morgan scanned the area for surveillance cameras, identifying blind spots where they could communicate more freely. Do you believe in redemption, Jamie? She asked suddenly. The younger woman considered the question carefully. I believe people can change. I believe they can recognize mistakes and try to correct them. Whether that counts as redemption depends on how much damage they've done in the first place. Morgan nodded, thinking of her former teammates, people who had destroyed her career but who were now risking their lives alongside her. People who had betrayed her but were now trusting her to lead them through this crisis. 3 years ago, I was so angry I could barely function, she admitted quietly. I lost everything, my career, my purpose, my identity. I wanted them to suffer for what they'd done to me. But you didn't let them suffer, Jamie pointed out. You kept monitoring the back door. You maintained your protective measures. You never stopped watching over them, even when they thought you'd disappeared. Completely. Morgan didn't respond immediately. The subway train arrived, doors sliding open to reveal a crowded car. They boarded silently, positioning themselves near the doors for quick exit if necessary. I didn't do it for them, Morgan finally said as the train pulled away from the station. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because someone had to protect the systems they were compromising, even if they didn't know they needed protection. Jamie studied her with newfound respect. That's why Lawson came to you now. Not just because you were right, but because you never stopped doing your job, even when they took it away from you. The observation struck Morgan with unexpected force. She had never thought of her actions in those terms, had never considered that her continued vigilance might be viewed as professional dedication rather than personal obsession. The secondary location is 3 stops ahead, she said, changing the subject. We'll exit separately, you first, then me after a 30-second delay. Turn left out of the station, then second right into the commercial district. Jamie nodded, her expression shifting back to focused professionalism. And if we're separated? Trust your instincts, Morgan replied. And remember that sometimes, the people who hurt you the most are the ones who need your protection the most. As the train hurtled through the darkness toward their destination, Morgan allowed herself a moment of reflection. 3 years ago, her world had collapsed because she refused to ignore a threat that others wanted to pretend didn't exist. Now those same people were turning to her for salvation, counting on the skills and integrity they had once dismissed as paranoia, They had destroyed her career, but she had never stopped protecting them. And now, that protection might be the only thing standing between them and complete annihilation. The train began slowing as it approached the next station. Morgan checked the platform through the windows, looking for anything out of place, any sign that their movements had been anticipated. "Ready?" she asked Jamie. The younger woman nodded, her expression resolute. "Ready." The doors slid open, and Jamie stepped out into whatever awaited them next, a world of shadows and betrayal, but also one of redemption and purpose. Morgan watched her go, then followed 30 seconds later, moving toward a confrontation. 3 years in the making, they had destroyed her career, but she had never stopped protecting them. And now, that protection would be tested in ways none of them had imagined. The secondary location was a small internet cafe tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, the kind of place where customers minded their own business and security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned with regularity. Morgan entered first, scanning the dimly lit interior for familiar faces. Daniel and Sarah were already there, seated at a corner table with a clear view of both the entrance and the emergency exit. No sign of Michael or Lawson yet. Morgan gave them a subtle nod as she ordered coffee from the board attendant, then made her way to a terminal 2 stations away from her teammates. Jamie arrived 5 minutes later, following protocol perfectly. Different entrance timing, no acknowledgement, separate positioning. She chose a terminal near the front, appearing completely absorbed in her screen while maintaining peripheral awareness of the entire cafe. Morgan accessed a secure messaging platform through proxies that would make her location nearly impossible to trace. She checked the emergency drop account she'd established years ago, finding a message waiting. From Michael, delayed. Alternate route necessary. ETA 45 minutes. No mention of Lawson. That could mean anything: separation, compromise, or simply operational security. Morgan sent a brief acknowledgement code, then deleted the exchange. The cafe's atmosphere was tense with unspoken urgency. Other patrons came and went, none staying longer than 20 minutes, mostly students. A few gig workers, nobody who triggered Morgan's well-honed instincts for identifying surveillance. After 30 minutes of patient waiting, Morgan received another message, this one encrypted with a key only 5 people in the world possessed. Package secured. Incoming. Clear path. She looked up just as Michael entered the cafe, alone. He ordered tea with careful casualness, then sat at a terminal between Morgan and Daniel, creating a loose perimeter of awareness around their impromptu base of operations. Morgan waited. 5 more minutes before standing, stretching as if tired from too long at the computer, and making her way to the restroom. Daniel followed a moment later. Then Sarah. Jamie and Michael remained at their stations, watching for any reaction to the movement. The cafe's back hallway was narrow and poorly lit, perfect for their needs. A service door led to a small storage room that the owner never used, part of the reason Morgan had selected this location years ago as an emergency rally point. Lawson? She asked as soon as the door closed behind them. Secure, Michael replied. He's waiting at the 3rd location with the evidence. We separated when we spotted a surveillance team 2 blocks from the warehouse exit. Daniel's expression was grim. They're moving faster than anticipated. The AI system must have predictive capabilities beyond what we modeled. It doesn't just predict, Sarah added. It learns from each interaction, each search pattern. The more we try to evade it, the better it gets at anticipating our next move. Morgan processed this information, recalculating their options. We need to get to Martinez before they realize that's our objective. Once they understand we're trying to expose the operation, they'll either eliminate her or compromise her security detail. How? Daniel asked. Every approach will be monitored. Every communication channel is potentially compromised. Morgan's mind raced through scenarios, weighing risks against probabilities. We use their system against them. We create a diversion that forces them to focus resources elsewhere while we make direct contact. Sarah looked skeptical. What kind of diversion could possibly distract from the senator who's about to expose their entire operation? A bigger threat, Morgan replied. Something that would trigger automatic security protocols beyond their ability to override. She turned to Michael. The Pentagon's intrusion response system is still air-gapped from the main network, correct? Michael nodded slowly, understanding dawning on his face. You want to trigger a Level 1 security alert. That would automatically reroute all active intelligence personnel to defensive positions, leaving minimal coverage on secondary targets, including Martinez, Morgan confirmed. That's insanely risky, Daniel objected. Triggering a false Level 1 alert is treason under at least 3 different statutes. Who said anything about false? Morgan's voice was steady. The threat is real. We just need to make it visible to the right people at the right time. The plan came together quickly, each team member contributing their expertise to a strategy. That balanced audacity with precision. They would need perfect timing, flawless execution, and a significant amount of luck. But most of all, they would need absolute trust in each other, a resource that had been depleted 3 years ago and was only now being cautiously replenished. Jamie stays with me, Morgan decided. Her active credentials will be essential for the final approach. The rest of you focus on the diversion. If anything goes wrong, abort and scatter. Protocol Blackbird. And Lawson? Sarah asked. Lawson delivers the evidence directly to Martinez during the confusion. His position gives him access that none of us have. The team dispersed carefully, exiting the cafe at irregular intervals to avoid creating a noticeable pattern. Morgan and Jamie were the last to leave, waiting 15 minutes after Daniel's departure before making their way to the street. You're trusting Lawson with the most crucial part of the mission, Jamie observed as they walked. After everything he did to you. Morgan's pace didn't falter. I'm not trusting Lawson. I'm trusting the evidence and the man I knew before all this happened, the one who recruited me because he valued integrity above politics. People change, Jamie pointed out. Yes, Morgan agreed. That's what I'm counting on. They made their way through the evening crowds, 2 unremarkable women in a sea of commuters. Morgan led them on a circuitous route designed to identify any surveillance, doubling back occasionally, changing pace, using reflective surfaces to check behind them without being obvious. Jamie matched her movements with natural grace, never questioning the seemingly random changes in direction. Morgan felt a flicker of professional admiration for the younger woman's adaptability. How did you end up in my old position? She asked during a stretch of walking that seemed clear of observers. Jamie's smile was brief. I asked for it. When? The opening was posted internally. Everyone avoided it like it was radioactive. The position that had been held by the paranoid analyst who tried to undermine national security wasn't exactly a career accelerator. But you wanted it anyway. I reviewed your case files, Jamie admitted. The ones that weren't completely redacted. Your methodology was brilliant, innovative but systematic. I wanted to learn from it, even if you weren't there to teach. Me, Morgan absorbed this unexpected compliment in silence. For 3 years she'd assumed her work had been buried, her methods discredited, her contributions erased from institutional memory. The idea that someone had not only studied her approach but admired it enough to follow in her footsteps was both validating and slightly disorienting. Your analysis of the server logs earlier was spot on, she offered. You identified the evolutionary patterns faster than I would have. Jamie looked surprised at the praise. I had 3 years of additional data to work with. Data is meaningless without the right analytical framework, Morgan countered. You have good instincts, trust them. They reached a busy intersection, waiting for the light to change among dozens of other pedestrians. Morgan scanned the crowd automatically, a habit born from years of fieldwork. Her gaze caught on a man across the street. Average height, nondescript clothing, seemingly absorbed in his phone. But his eyes flicked up at precise intervals, scanning the crowd with practiced efficiency. "We've got company," she murmured to Jamie. Across the street, Blue Jacket, checking his phone. Jamie didn't turn to look. "I see him." Another at our 2 o'clock, pretending to window shop. "When the light changes, we move with the crowd, then split at the next block. You go east. I go west. Reconnect at the alternate location in 30 minutes. Jamie nodded almost imperceptibly. When the pedestrian signal changed, they crossed with the surge of people, deliberately separating as they reached the other side. Morgan turned west, moving with purpose but not urgency. She didn't look back to see if Jamie had successfully broken contact. Either she had or she hadn't. Looking would only compromise them both. The next 15 minutes were a careful dance of evasion. Morgan used every technique in her considerable arsenal, changing pace, exploiting blind spots in surveillance camera coverage, blending with groups of similar-looking pedestrians, even briefly entering a department store to change her outer layer of clothing. By the time she approached the alternate meeting location, a 24-hour diner with poor lighting and excellent sight lines, she was reasonably confident she'd lost any physical tail. Digital tracking was another matter entirely, but they had protocols for that as well. Jamie was already there, seated in a booth with a cup of coffee and a clear view of the entrance. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were alert, constantly scanning without appearing to do so. Morgan approved of her technique, natural but effective. "Clean?" she asked as she slid into the booth. "As far as I can tell," Jamie replied. "Though if their A is as sophisticated as Daniel believes, traditional counter-surveillance methods may not be sufficient." Morgan nodded. "That's why we keep moving. Static targets are predictable targets." Jamie pushed a burner phone across the table. "Message from Michael. The diversion is in place. Timeline is set for 09:00 tomorrow." Morgan checked the time. Just past midnight. Less than 9 hours to prepare for an operation that would either save their intelligence infrastructure or brand them all as traitors to their country. The weight of it settled across her shoulders, familiar and heavy. "What about you?" Jamie asked suddenly. "After this is over, assuming we succeed and survive, what happens to Morgan Chen?" The question caught Morgan off guard. She'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that she hadn't considered what might come after. For 3 years, her existence had been defined by vigilance and preparation for this exact scenario. What would be left when that purpose was fulfilled? "I haven't thought that far ahead," she admitted. "Reinstatement would be the minimum they'd owe you," Jamie pointed out. "Formal apology, back pay, restoration of clearances." Morgan's laugh was soft but genuine. "You have a very optimistic view of bureaucratic justice." "Not optimistic, determined." Jamie's expression was suddenly fierce. "They destroyed your career because you were right. Because you refused to look the other way when it would have been easier to do so. That deserves recognition, not just quiet restitution." Morgan studied the younger woman, seeing something of herself in that passionate defensive principle. "Is that why you risked your own career to help me? To right an institutional wrong?" "Partly," Jamie acknowledged. "But mostly because I believe in doing the right thing, even when, especially when, it comes with personal cost. Just like you did." The simple statement hit Morgan with unexpected force. In the chaos of betrayal and exile, she'd lost sight of the core truth that had guided her actions 3 years ago. Doing the right thing mattered, regardless of consequences. She'd protected her former teammates not out of loyalty to them personally, but out of commitment to the principles they'd once shared. "We should move," she said, finishing her coffee. "The operation timeline gives us just enough time to get into position." As they left the diner, Morgan's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Lawson in position. Evidence secured. Awaiting signal. The pieces were falling into place. By this time tomorrow, the truth would either be exposed or buried forever, along with anyone who tried to reveal it. The next morning dawned gray and drizzling, perfect weather for their purposes. Poor visibility meant less effective surveillance, and rain provided excellent cover for concealing faces beneath hoods and umbrellas. Morgan and Jamie positioned themselves in a coffee shop across from the Capitol building, where Senator Martinez was scheduled to chair a committee meeting at 10 a.m. According to their intelligence, she always arrived precisely 1 hour early to review materials before other members appeared. Michael's team is in place, Jamie reported, checking her secure phone. Diversion initiates in 12 minutes. Morgan nodded, watching the security perimeter through the cafe window. Martinez's usual protective detail was visible, 2 agents at the main entrance, another monitoring the staff access point. Standard configuration for a senator who wasn't considered a high-priority target. That would change dramatically in the next hour. At precisely 8:48 a.m., Morgan's phone vibrated with a single message. Package delivered. Countdown active. Across town, Michael and his team had successfully planted evidence of the AI backdoor in a system that would trigger the Pentagon's intrusion detection protocols. When discovered, it would initiate an automatic Level 1 security response. The highest priority threat assessment, requiring all available intelligence personnel to focus on potential attack vectors, including those assigned to routine protective details. 8 minutes, Jamie murmured, finishing her coffee with remarkable composure given the circumstances. Morgan watched the security team across the street, looking for the subtle shift in posture that would indicate they'd received new orders. Right on schedule, one agent touched his earpiece, his expression changing from bored alertness to focused tension. He spoke rapidly to his colleagues, who immediately began scanning the perimeter with renewed intensity. "They've been notified," Morgan observed, "but not recalled yet. They're waiting for confirmation." 2 minutes later, that confirmation came. All 3 agents received communication simultaneously, creating a momentary flurry of activity as they coordinated their response. 2 moved quickly toward the building's interior, presumably to secure the senator. The 3rd remained at his post, though his attention was now divided between his communication device and the surrounding area. "Phase 1 complete," Morgan said quietly. "Martinez is being moved to a secure location within the building. Standard protocol when they don't have time for full evacuation, which means Lawson is already inside," Jamie added. "He'll intercept her during the security escort." They waited, tension building with each passing minute. Everything depended on precise timing now. Lawson needed to reach Martinez with the evidence before the AI system identified the diversion for what it was. At 9:04 a.m., Morgan's phone buzzed again. Contact made. Package transferred. Confirmation pending. "He reached her," Morgan translated. "But we don't know if she understood the significance yet." The next 10 minutes stretched like hours, each second heavy with potential consequences. If Martinez recognized the evidence for what it was, she had the authority to initiate immediate countermeasures, isolating critical systems, revoking compromised credentials, preserving evidence of the infiltration. If she dismissed it as paranoia or security drill gone wrong, everything they'd worked for would be lost. At 9:17 a.m., their answer came not from a message, but from the sudden shift in security posture outside the Capitol. Additional agents appeared at each entrance, their movements precise and purposeful. Security checkpoints were being enhanced, not reduced. Communications equipment was being distributed to staff. "She believed him," Jamie whispered, relief evident in her voice. "She's initiating secure protocols." Morgan allowed herself a small nod of acknowledgement. Phase 1 complete. Now we need confirmation that the evidence is being properly secured and analyzed. Before Jamie could respond, both their phones chimed with an urgent alert, the emergency channel they'd established for critical threats. The message was brief but alarming. Compromise detected. Lawson's security detail replaced. Unable to confirm current status. Morgan processed this with rapid clarity. They identified him as the source of the leak. His protective team has been replaced with operatives working for whoever is behind the AI system. Which means he's in immediate danger, Jamie concluded. Along with anyone he's contacted, including Martinez. They moved simultaneously, gathering their minimal belongings and exiting the cafe with careful haste. Morgan led them down a side street, away from direct sight lines to the Capitol. We need to warn them, Jamie insisted. If they don't know Lawson's detail has been compromised, they're already inside the security perimeter, Morgan pointed out. Any approach we make will be intercepted before we get within 100 yards of the building. Jamie's expression hardened with determination. Then we create another diversion. Something that forces them to bring Martinez out of the building through a predictable exit route. Morgan considered this. The eye would anticipate standard evacuation procedures. They'll have coverage on all primary and secondary exit points. What about maintenance access? The old tunnel system that connects to the congressional office buildings. Morgan's eyebrows raised slightly. Those were sealed after the security upgrades 3 years ago. Not all of them, Jamie replied. I processed the contractor reports myself. One access point was left open for emergency utility repairs, disguised as a storage closet on the lower level. Morgan reassessed her estimation of Jamie's resourcefulness. You've been studying more than just my analytical methods. I like to be thorough, Jamie said with a hint of pride. The tunnel connects to a utility room in the Longworth building basement. Minimal security coverage, especially during an active threat elsewhere. If we can get Martinez to that exit point, Morgan began. We need to tell her it's the only safe evacuation route, Jamie finished. Which means we need to communicate directly with her or someone she absolutely trusts. Morgan thought quickly. Her chief of staff, Eleanor Diaz. They've worked together for 12 years, and Diaz manages all secure communications for the senator's office. How do we reach her? We don't, Morgan decided. We make her reach us. Within minutes, they had formulated a plan that balanced urgency with caution. Using Jamie's still active credentials, they sent a message to Diaz's secure government email, not explaining the situation, which would trigger automated content filters, but requesting immediate contact through a specific secure channel. For time-sensitive information regarding this morning's security alert. It was vague enough to bypass automatic flagging systems, but specific enough that Diaz, already on high alert from the ongoing security situation, would recognize its importance. They waited in a nearby parking garage, using a series of proxy servers to mask their digital location. 5 tense minutes passed before the secure channel registered an incoming connection. This is Diaz, came the terse greeting. Identify yourself and your purpose immediately. This is Morgan Chen, former senior analyst with the Cyber Defense Unit, Morgan replied without hesitation. Senator Martinez is in immediate danger. The security detail assigned to Director Lawson has been compromised, and any standard evacuation procedure will place her directly in harm's way. A pause then. Chen? The analyst who was dismissed 3 years ago for security violations. The analyst who identified a backdoor in our intelligence systems that is now being used to target anyone who might expose it, Morgan corrected. Including the senator, who now has evidence of its existence thanks to Director Lawson. Another pause, longer this time. Morgan could almost hear Diaz's mind working, weighing risks and probabilities. Assume I believe you, Diaz finally said. What do you propose? The maintenance tunnel in the lower level storage area. Section C7. It leads to the Longworth building utility room. It's not on current security maps and won't be covered by standard protective protocols. That area was sealed during the last security upgrade, Diaz objected. Check the contractor reports filed under routine maintenance. June 2023. Access was preserved for emergency utility repairs. The sound of rapid typing came through the connection. Then, verified. But why should I trust you with the senators? Safety? Because I've spent the last 3 years protecting people who destroyed my career, Morgan replied simply. Because doing the right thing matters more than personal grievances. And because right now, I'm the only one who knows exactly how the AI system works and how to counter it. Silence stretched between them, heavy with decision. The senator received evidence from Director Lawson 20 minutes ago, Diaz finally said. Evidence that suggests our entire intelligence infrastructure has been compromised by an AI system designed to harvest and manipulate classified information. Is that what you're referring to? Yes, and whoever created that system will do anything to prevent its exposure, including eliminating everyone who knows of its existence. Including you, Diaz pointed out. Including me, Morgan agreed, which is why I need to speak with the senator directly. The evidence Lawson provided is only part of the story. I have the rest, 3 years of monitoring and documentation. That proves not only the existence of the backdoor, but who created it and why. Another pause then. Stand by. The connection went silent. Morgan and Jamie exchanged glances, aware that their entire plan now hinged on the judgment of someone they'd never met, whose loyalty to the senator might outweigh her willingness to trust a disgraced analyst's warning. After what felt like hours but was actually less than 2 minutes, the connection reactivated. The senator will evacuate through the route you suggested in exactly 15 minutes, Diaz said. She will be accompanied by myself and 2 members of her personal security team who have been with her since before she took office. No one else. We'll be waiting at the Longworth end of the tunnel, Morgan confirmed. And Diaz, make sure those security team members are people she'd trust with her life. Because that's exactly what she'd be doing. The connection terminated. Morgan checked the time, 9:32 am. They had 15 minutes to reach the Longworth building basement and secure the exit point before Martinez arrived. Will she come? Jamie asked as they moved quickly toward their destination. She'll come, Morgan replied with certainty. Because she's already seen enough evidence to know the threat is real. And because people like Martinez don't achieve her position without developing excellent instincts for distinguishing truth from manipulation. They reached the Longworth building through a service entrance, Jamie's credentials once again providing the access they needed. The basement level was quiet, most staff having been directed to secure locations due to the ongoing security alert. Morgan led them to the utility room with confidence born from years of memorizing building schematics as part of her analytical preparation. Inside, behind a stack of maintenance equipment, a nondescript door led to the tunnel system that had once connected all the major Capitol complex buildings. How did you know this was still accessible? Jamie asked as Morgan examined. The lock, I didn't, Morgan admitted. But I knew about the tunnels from my security assessment work, and you confirmed the contractor reports. Sometimes, the most overlooked vulnerabilities are the ones hiding in plain sight. They secured the room, positioning themselves with clear sight lines to both the tunnel entrance and the utility room door. Morgan checked her watch, 9:43 am. If Martinez was on schedule, she would arrive in approximately 4 minutes. What happens after we meet with the senator? Jamie asked quietly, assuming she believes everything we tell her. Morgan considered the question. She initiates a security protocol that only she has authority to activate, complete isolation of critical intelligence systems from any network access. It would essentially create an air gap around our most sensitive infrastructures while a trusted team identifies and removes the II backdoor. And the people behind it? That depends. On who they turn out to be, Morgan replied, and how high up the chain of command they reach. Before Jamie could respond, they heard the faint sound of movement from the tunnel entrance. Morgan tensed, hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. The door opened slowly, revealing Eleanor Diaz, recognizable from news photographs. Her expression a mask of professional caution. Behind her came Senator Martinez herself, flanked by two serious-looking men whose posture and awareness screamed professional security. "Morgan Chen," Martinez said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being heard without raising her volume. 3 years ago, you were called paranoid for identifying a threat that no one wanted to acknowledge. Today, I need you to tell me exactly what we're facing and how to stop it. Morgan met the senator's gaze directly. The AI system that's infiltrated our intelligence infrastructure isn't just gathering information. It's actively manipulating it to serve whoever created it. And now that it's been exposed, it will eliminate anyone who threatens its continued operation, including you. Martinez nodded, unsurprised. Director Lawson's evidence suggested as much. What he couldn't tell me was who's behind it. I can, Morgan said, because I've spent 3 years tracking every access point, every data manipulation, every digital fingerprint they thought they'd erased. She reached into her bag, removing a small device similar to the one Daniel had retrieved from the server room. This contains the complete analysis, including the identity of the primary architect. As she handed it to the senator, Morgan felt the weight of 3 years of isolation and vigilance lifting from her shoulders. The truth was finally emerging, not in a tribunal designed to bury it, but in the hands of someone with the authority and integrity to act on it. They had destroyed her career, but she had never stopped protecting them. And now, that protection would extend to the very foundations of their national security. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.